Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're here at Chaparral Motorsports today, and we got the guys from Galfer down here to show us how to install one of their oversized brake rotor kits with a bracket.
Today we're going to be installing the Galfer 270mm Tsunami Oversized kit on the front of this bike. All of our kits are going to include a bracket and pads for your application. There are some 2015, 2016 bikes that come from the factory with this 270mm rotor. In that case, these rotors are available separately. So the tools that you're going to need to install your Galfer Oversized kit are going to include a soft mallet, you're going to need some box wrenches, you need a socket, and some hex wrenches. The first step in removing this is going to be the front wheel. You want to make sure that you take the front wheel off, and then we're going to move on to the caliper bracket, or the relocation bracket. So the next step is going to be to remove the two bolts that hold the factory caliper bracket to the caliper. So now we're going to remove the pins that hold the factory pads in. This is going to allow us access to the caliper bracket. And then we're going to use a hex wrench to remove the caliper pin. So at this point, we've unthreaded the pin. You can slide the pin out and remove the pads. We're now going to slide the factory caliper bracket off of the caliper. Just like this. We'll be reusing the factory pin. I'll show you in a moment how to remove that easily. So the easiest way to remove this factory pin is to go ahead and reinstall the factory caliper bracket onto the fork lug. You can snug it down using one of the bolts. It doesn't need to be super tight. And take a 14mm socket, extended socket, and remove the pin. Once you have that out, you can go ahead and remove the bolts. We're going to move over to the bench. We're going to remove the factory rubber grommet as well as the pad spring clip, transfer those over to the new caliper bracket. So I've got our parts transferred over, the pad spring clip, got the rubber boot and the pin. It's lightly threaded in here. Got it reinstalled on the fork mount. We're gonna go ahead and tighten this pin down. Doesn't have to be super tight, just snug. And then we're gonna go ahead and remove this bracket and transfer the caliper and a new set of pads over to it. So now we're ready to install the caliper relocation bracket onto the caliper. One thing to note, you can use a little bit of grease on these slider pins. Definitely don't want to over grease these. If they're over greased, it can actually lock the caliper up and prevent it from sliding. So you're going to go ahead and slide the caliper bracket back onto the caliper. Slide it all the way inboard. Now we're going to go ahead and install a fresh set of pads. It's critical whenever you're replacing a rotor to install a fresh set of pads. They are going to wear to the specific rotor. So even if you have a fairly fresh set of pads, it's a good idea to replace them at this point. Now we're going to install the caliper back onto the fork leg. This is a complete assembly at this point. And once you get it installed, go ahead and torque it down. Want to use your recommended manufacturer torque specs on all of these bolts. So next we're going to remove the factory hardware from the rotor. You're going to go ahead and remove all 4 bolts in this case. You're going to go ahead and replace it with our Galfer rotor. You want to make sure that when you reinstall the bolts, we'll be reusing those factory bolts, that you add some blue Loctite to each fastener to make sure those stay in place. Go ahead and torque those to your factory recommended specs. The last step in the installation process is installing the front wheel. You want to torque all your fasteners to the recommended torque specs. We also recommend cleaning the rotor's braking surface with alcohol or acetone. If you have any oil on your hands, if you touch it, you want to remove any of that residue before you ride on it. Give it a proper break-in procedure. If you have any questions during the install or on any of our products, don't hesitate to give us a call.